Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this installment of the DEI Forum. My name is Lauren Steedley. I serve as Vice President for Diversity and Inclusive Growth here at the Chattanooga Area Chamber of Commerce. We're excited to have our first installment of the DEI Forum for this year, and that is that this is a process or programming that we provided that dates back to December of 2020. In it, it was an opportunity to elevate work, training, development, best practices that are engaged in the work of diversity, equity, inclusion, and its impact on organizations, not only in Chattanooga and Hamilton County, but around the country and around the world. So we've had the benefit of having some great, I would say, thought leaders and practitioners to come on to share their wisdom with our audience here in the area. And before I go any further or introduce our today's speaker, let me also point out this one to special acknowledgement for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, who's been our long-term sponsor of these events. We're very appreciative of their continued partnership and sponsorships of these events. So having said that, I just want to pivot a little bit, introduce our speaker, and then pass it on over to her. We have the pleasure today of having our guest speaker is Tracy Wood. Tracy Wood serves as the President CEO of Alleo Health Systems, a regional hospice and intergenerational senior care service, integrated senior care service, and it's based here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Hey, Tracy, I want to say good morning. I want to say welcome. Just want to hand it off to you and welcome.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you to the Chamber and to the sponsors of this event for having me today. You know, I think that, DEI is something that we've been talking about for a while now. And today I want to talk about, let's talk about application and action. And I want to start off with just a poll. So using 1 to 2 words, describe what diversity and inclusion means to you. So we'll just take a second for everybody just to put their responses in the chat box.
Okay, I'm trying to look for responses here. Maybe got somewhat of a technical glitch because I'm not noticing. Okay, where every voice is heard. Okay. I don't see a coding here. I don't see a numeric rating here.
Okay, so yeah, I see where every voice is heard and every person has an opportunity to bring their full selves to the table. That's awesome. Any other responses? Inclusivity of all people with value to each person, individual person. Thank you. I love it. So as we are journeying, taking a journey through diversity and inclusion in the workplace, making sure equity and inclusion, making sure everyone has a voice today, we know for the most part that organizations contain individuals from all different backgrounds. So, although we all could be of the same race system or class system, we all were raised very differently. And so we think differently on different subjects, but everyone wants to feel a part. Everybody wants to feel valued. And it's always great to have a company or organization where you feel like you have an influence on decisions and you have a voice. And equity, we all know, is equal opportunity. And I think we kind of throw that around a lot in the terms of, equal opportunity. And historically, we've talked quite a bit about equal opportunity. Well, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not necessarily equal opportunity employment, and it's not necessarily affirmative action. Diversity and inclusion is something that we should do voluntarily. It should be self-directed. It's not something that should be something that is regulated. It needs to be purposeful, and we should want to increase representation and give underrepresented groups the opportunity to be in an inclusive work environment where everyone is affected and in a good way. So many times we talk about why diversity and inclusion, and what does that really have to do with our workspace? What does that really have to do with my business? Why do I need diversity and inclusion to thrive? So, another quick poll. An inclusive work environment leads to an increased sense of belonging, which is linked to low turnover risk, increased job performance, fewer sick days, or all of the above. So if you take a moment, awesome. So overwhelmingly, we have the response of all of the above. And you're exactly right. So when we look at businesses that have a positive workplace culture that is inclusive, we see positive impacts on the bottom line. And that is why we do business, is because it's our passion, but we have to have our businesses to be sustainable, to be impactful in the long run, and to keep reaching customers and new customers and understanding those opportunities out there. And so when we start talking about creativity, when we bring people from all cultures to the table, we create creativity in the workplace. And when we allow everyone to feel free in having an opinion and sharing it without feeling discredited or devalued, it increases productivity. And one of the biggest costs that we all know from a business perspective is retention. And if we don't have retention and we have lots of turnover, we're constantly developing our workforce, and we're constantly training our workforce. So when we do that, that is taken away from our opportunities to create and be productive. So if you look at this slide, you will see that an inclusive work environment leads to increased belonging, which is linked to a 56% job performance. 56% of your job performance has increased over a place where you're missing that inclusivity. You're missing that sense of belonging. You have a turnover risk of 50% more. And people call in 75% more when they don't feel like they belong. So what can we do to make sure that we are reaching our employees, and how do we get there? And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later in this presentation. But I think it's also important for us to talk about, what do we think some of the risk may be if we don't have an inclusive culture? So why don't you go ahead and type a few things in the chat that you think that the risk may be if we don't have an inclusive culture. So how can our businesses be impacted if our cultures are not inclusive and we don't have diversity? Division, tension, lack of, yes. Yes, harassment. Very good. Very good. So that is exactly right. When we don't have inclusivity, there's risk. And what you will see on this slide is look how many claims the EEOC had in 2019 that were paid, but not necessarily actually ever went any further than mediation, or they were settled. So mediation settlements was $83.5 million. Enforcement withdrawals was $116.2 million. So having an inclusive workforce will definitely help to avoid litigation, reduce employees' relation issues, just as it was mentioned earlier, that whole tension and division in the workplace, it softens, your turnover softens, people want to be there. But when you have tension and division, then that is what leads to the lawsuits. Exactly, Laura. The lack of understanding and litigation. You are certainly at risk when you don't have a sense of understanding and a culture of inclusivity. So where do we start? And we've talked about this many times in several different forums. We talk about it, but what can we do that's actionable? And, understanding what values you have in your company, understanding your the values of your workforce, understanding the values of your leaders, understanding their behaviors, you know, how do you take those behaviors and then shift your culture? And, it has to be, you have to have a sense of, hey, I'm going to be courageous and talk about, behaviors that may not resemble the values of my company or the culture. We know that culture impacts performance. So when we think about culture impacting performance, how long does it really take to shift the culture? So if you just want to drop that in the chat of how long do you think that it takes to shift a culture? Eight months. It depends on the work. I believe that it would take around 6 months. Yolanda, I agree with you. It is ongoing. Culture, it depends on, of course, how long has your culture that you currently have that you want to shift, how long has it been embedded in your organization? And what is the work that needs to be done? But we do know that establishing your values from ground up and making sure that you are talking about your values and understanding behaviors every single day help create your overall culture and drives the performance that you're looking for. Okay, another poll. What percentage of employees with an inclusive leader believe that their leader helped empower the team to perform at a high level? A, 30%, B, 51%, C, 75%, D, 92%. Okay, we have one more poll question after this that aligns with this question. What percentage of employees without an inclusive leader believe that their leader helps empower the team to perform at a high level? A, 26, B, 33, C, 48, D, 63. "92% helps empower teams to perform at a higher level." So when you think about that impact, so if you have a leader that inclusivity is a part of their thinking and a part of your team, the teams perform at 92% higher. That is absolutely incredible. So what are some of the 6 signature traits of an inclusive leader? So one of the things that we know is that we have to be curious. So as a leader and asking questions and be willing and open to the responses. So as you're thinking about leadership in your day-to-day role, I think we have to think about the way that we're asking questions, because that all leads into cultures. So one culture may believe that the tone or the question was not offensive, but then another may think it is. So we have to have cultural intelligence. And you say, what is cultural intelligence? Well, really learning to understand the people that we work with, their cultures, their backgrounds, and not understand it in a passive aggressive way, but really reach out and understand and not play just to the stereotypes. We all know that going outside of our comfort zone is extremely hard. So sometimes crossing over and understanding our biases, we all have them, understanding what those are and being intentional about not defying them. So, it's interesting. I was listening to a talk around healthcare equity just the other day, and the thought leader that was presenting was talking about understanding our own bias and understanding that as much as we all like to think that we don't have biases, we really do. And how do you really check yourself on those biases? And one of the examples that he talked about was a judge down in Florida. And this judge in, I believe it was Jacksonville, Florida, was a pillar in the community. He was known to be a religious man that was very upright, and everyone in the community looked to him as being honorable. And it was some work done around his sentencing and his sentencing of people of color versus people that were just normal people that would come in, people of color, come in with something, their very first offense, never have been in trouble, versus white people that had similar crimes. And so even though, there was this these very similar crimes and sentencing would happen the very next day. In many cases, the people of color who were everyday working people and seem not to would have the same points. In Florida, they have this point system, would get a tremendous amount of more punishment and even time in jail, where other people would maybe get time served or would get probation, where white people would get probation. And so when they took these stats to him, he said it wasn't true. He did not believe that he would actually sentence someone based on their race. So we know that biases happen in healthcare, bias happens deduced in injustice, biases happen simple things at the airport. You know, there are biases everywhere. So being cognizant of your biases is super important in making sure that you're willing to step across lines and collaborate. And then most importantly, being committed to self-reflection, calling yourself out or calling others out is super important in moving the needle and being actionable. So here, this is the building block for inclusive leaders. So I would encourage everyone, I believe this slide deck will be shared. So, you know, look through this and understand, you know, courage. You know, we all know that courage takes humility, but it takes a lot of bravery. So where do we fit in that scale of bravery? And where do we fit in the scale of cultural intelligence? Like, do we have the drive to really seek out learning about other cultures? Do we have the knowledge, or are we willing to get the knowledge and then apply it and be adaptable? So when we are looking through who we are and making sure we're building inclusive leaders within our organization, focusing on self-regulation. And that's a very hard one. And I think that that's something that we all need to do every single day. And so how do we prepare? How do we actually prepare? And what can we do? What resources, what tools are needed for us to become an inclusive leader, have a diverse team? What can we do? What are some of the things that you have seen in your organizations, or that you do in your organizations? Let's put that in the chat. Develop groups of employees. So great, Carlin. Develop groups of employees to have honest conversations around diversity and inclusion. That's always a great tactic. Anybody else? Open meetings for safe space. Awesome, thank you, Martina. Celebrate individuals' accomplishments professionally and personally. Bridge the gap of bias within our offices. True appreciation for each other. Awesome. Awareness of their own bias and how bias affects the company culture and the health of the organization. Awesome, Laura. So there are tons of tools, and having trainings around unconscious bias, understanding and being respectful in the workplace. But I think, ensuring that our leaders have the tools and we're supportive of diversity, equity, and inclusion will certainly help our leaders feel supported and feel holding those one-on-one sessions and giving space and time for those to happen. Maybe making that a part of your overall evaluations of your executive team and your leadership teams, and maybe having that a part of 365 evaluations or your employee satisfaction surveys to really measure how we're doing, so we're not in a bubble thinking that we're doing great and we're really not. And then I love this one, incentivizing leaders to be involved. So again, as a part of that review process or positive reinforcement or different ways to incentivize leaders across the organization will definitely help with buy-in. Most organizations now have embraced diversity, equity, and inclusion. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel that we are doing in Hamilton County? How do you feel that we're doing regionally? Or let's not be so pointed maybe to Hamilton County. How do you feel that we're doing nationally on a scale of 1 to 10? Five, five. Five. So we all know that there's quite a bit of work for us to do. And, we are all here today because we're committed to the work, and we will be actionable and accountable to moving the needle in our community. But remembering, when we move the needle in our community, we are perfectly regionally set from a geographic standpoint, so we can really impact how we move the needle in our region. And our industries in our area are growing, so we have the capacity to have a global impact, and we have the capacity to Chattanooga to be one of the best cities in this country. And we have Gig City, we have all of the tools. So really bringing diversity and inclusion to our businesses and making sure that we are able to serve new customers each and every day is our goal. And we are a brilliant community with so many brilliant minds. We will definitely be higher than a 5 if we embrace and be inclusive and bring all those creative ideas to the table. So our DEI takeaways for 2022 and beyond. So we all agree that it's a priority. We all know that having more diverse talent will help us catapult our businesses. But we can know these things, but if we don't create an action plan, then we are not really going anywhere, right? So we need to understand our action plan, get it moving, be inclusive in our leadership, make sure everyone is on the same page, and update our policies and procedures to reflect where we're going. Uh-oh. Sorry, guys. So we know that creating and managing a diverse workforce is a process and it's not a destination. I am happy to take any questions.
Well, first of all, Tracy, I just want to say thank you. That was awesome. Great content. And yeah, let's open it up for questions. And if you guys are taking a minute to formulate your questions, you know, you don't leave a door open for Lauren Steedley because I got questions. You know, there's a couple of things as you guys are putting your questions together. One of the things that comes to mind for me, Tracy, maybe you could touch on this, is globalism. I mean, you're looking at stats around the country, around the world. Increasingly, we're going to be much more diverse community. I read a piece recently around the United Nations talks about 80% of the world's population is going to be Asian or African by 2050. So this impacts your customers, this impacts your cultural competency, which you touched on earlier. How is it that folks, in terms of the business case, understand that, yeah, we want to be intentional about this, but understand it is an imperative because as we move forward, this is the reality. And so it transcends Hamilton, Chattanooga, but in terms of just sustainability, you know, the diversity inclusion is so critical.
Oh, yes. I mean, this is it. This is it. This is the time for us to transcend, because if we don't, we're going to lose our global impact. We're not going to have it. We are not going to be able to attract and retain the people that have the ideas. If we just stay stuck in our bubble and not realize where we're going as a global commerce and global perspective, then we are not, we're taking 10 steps backwards.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
10 steps backwards.
I saw there was a one chat, and thank you for that. I saw there was a question in the chat or a comment. Let's see where, let's see. Okay, it's a long one. This is very important to incorporate across the board. As I've experienced as an environment with diversity and inclusion, this pushed everyone to strive to perform better and create a better working environment. Would you be interested in developing local/national classes on incorporating diversity and inclusion? Take it away, Tracy.
Well, absolutely. I think that, you know, at this point in where we are, if we don't incorporate diversity and inclusion in our boardrooms, if we don't incorporate it in our thought leaders, in creating content, creating product, creating who we are in the products that we sell, we could easily be like a Blockbuster. Exactly. Or Redbox. And we know that they don't exist anymore.
Right, absolutely.
So if we don't take those big steps and it's almost taking a risk, because we're outside of our comfort zone. We are outside of it. If we are not intentional about learning about Asian culture, African culture, many minority cultures, and understanding them, then we're looking to be the Blockbusters.
Yeah, LGBTQ, veterans, folks with disabilities, inclusivity with a big L, you know.
Yes.
And not just along the racial lines, geographic lines, but of course, veterans, also, as I said, LGBTQ, folks with disability. But, you know, one of the things that I'm interested in is also the question around allies, because there are folks who subconsciously, because of the nature of the narrative around D&I, think it's their issue. And so sometimes I think it's important to speak to how folks who have best of intentions want to be about part of the solution, understand that productivity and profitability is very centered, but maybe they're trying to figure out how can they be allies in this conversation. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, absolutely everybody has a voice in this. Even if your voice, even if you feel like your voice is old school, or you feel like your voice is off base, I think that everyone coming to the table, the key is being open, right? So you have to be open and understanding how to move the needle, how to be an ally, and how to move forward. And again, just like you just mentioned, it's not just geographic, it's not just racial, it's every single being and every single being that is different. And at the end of the day, we all are different. Mm-hmm. We all none of us think exactly alike. So everyone has something to offer, and we all need to be open in feeling comfortable enough to bring who we are from an authentic perspective. And that authentic perspective may be just the right ingredient to take us to a whole new level.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think you touched on a couple other things that I wrote some notes to myself, and you talked about cultural intelligence. I think you touched on that in your previous answers. But I think some of the other things that ping up for me here at the chamber, of course, we're looking at regional mobility, we're looking at profitability, and we're looking at the value add of inclusive leadership. So as we think about ourselves, as we think about our communities, are there other sort of suggestions or recommendations that you would think that we need to embrace? Because I always often make the business case, and the business case is about sustainability, adaptability, which is critical, because at the end of the day, it's about productivity and profit. But any thoughts or elaborations as relates to this being about the business case and understanding how critical this is to growth and expansion and competition and participation in a marketplace that's forever changing?
Yeah, two things. I think that, profitability, sustainability, yes, we got to have it. But also, this is what grows our communities, no matter what community we live in. Our business helps sustain and grow our community and raise our communities up. Now, when we start to think about business, I mean, the goal is to be able to scale, right? Scale your business and be able to bring, if you're able to bring value, the same values that we talked about today to your business, and you're able to scale it, whether it's across the city, county, state, nationally, globally, you're able to do that. Look at the community impact that you're having. And so as much as, business is about productivity and profitability and sustainability, but it's also about community. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when you take that, look at the contributions, we all are responsible for, really. It's when we're making that leap to go into business, we're saying we're responsible. So not just for our product, we're responsible for the people that work there. We're responsible for the communities that our businesses serve.
Yeah, awesome. And I just had one other question, and this is in the space of just the significance of sort of generational diversity, because you got young people entering into the market, the boomers are walking out of the market. And being intentional, also being self-aware about the variations in terms of not only just temperament, but expectations of this younger generation that's coming into the marketplace and what their expectations are because many have a greater expectation with regards to inclusivity than perhaps the previous generation. So could you just touch on that maybe?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that I would say about our younger generations is that when we talk about inclusivity, we need to learn to listen to them, right? Our younger generation, they have very high expectations in terms of work-life balance, inclusivity, things that really matter to us as a people. They are standing up and saying, hey, this is the kind of life I want. This is the kind of lifestyle I want. And it's our job to listen as leaders and bringing their innovation to the table. It's crucial, but that goes back to the inclusivity. And so I think understanding and not being dismissive and listening it's all a part of the inclusivity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. And I will say, again, I think with the generational question, that cuts across race, it cuts across geography. Young people have a different interpretation as a group of who they want to work with, who they want to work around, and they're used to more inclusivity when they're day to day than perhaps the previous generations. In many ways, because of demographics, you see in demographic shifts and how that's playing out. So I just think one of those observations I made in my work is trying to pay closer attention to the generational shift and its implications with regards to the diversity and inclusion space as well. So that's awesome. Now, I did want to go back because I don't know if we addressed it, Tracy. The one question we had in the chat about sort of training and development, I think incorporating, would you be interested in developing local, national classes on incorporating diversity and inclusion? And, my personal answer would be yes, but I'd be curious to see what your thoughts were on that.
Oh yeah, of course. I think that, it's all of us that need to work to move the needle. And it's really certainly impactful to all of us. We don't ever know the interactions that we're gonna have as we travel. And here locally in Hamilton County, we want to make sure that we're a progressive city, that that we're making a difference. So absolutely.
Okay. Well, Trace, that was awesome. I had some more time here because I was looking at I made out a calendar for myself for the call, and I just wanted to provide opportunity. If others had questions or feedback for Tracy, this is a great time to raise those questions. And as folks are teeing up, I just want to say that what I've discovered about this work in real time, the question around this to talent diversity has been a big question here locally, and that is to stay competitive, continue to grow markets. At the same time, looking at procurement as a way, particularly looking at this infrastructure bill, what opportunities it provides in terms of inclusive collaboration, cooperation, leadership, and then also as topically, just looking a little bit more closely, again, at this generational question, from a point of view of how do you bring folks to a marketplace that has all the intangibles. Here's a quick comment. This was also continue to be a much needed conversation, continues to be a much needed conversation. Thank you, Kim. So having said that, did you have any additional words of wisdoms, nuggets that you want to share by way of just information, insight, and guidance on this very important topic?
Well, I would say that we can't learn enough, right? So really be intentional about reading, learning, collaborating, reaching across the line. We can't know enough about someone else's background. We can't know enough about another culture. We take for granted that everyone knows and understands our culture and our biases, but take the time. It's important. That's the only way that we're gonna do better and be better. So if I had one call to action is take the time to learn and then apply it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Tracy, just by way of sort of wrapping and closing this thing out, I just want to thank you for your tremendous contributions to this conversation, this ongoing dialogue. I thank you for availing yourself and providing your wisdom on this topic. I think each and every one of us on the call has been further enlightened and educated on the value add of this. And I think that as we go forward, I just want to be mindful of folks that as we go forward, we will continue to do these types of sessions that are intended to elevate information, provide resources for businesses who are engaged in this conversation in an effort, once again, to elevate their sustainability and profitability and also productivity given the directions of where we are in this given moment. So I just want to say thanks again, Tracy. And just by way of just closing this out, as always, I want to thank Blue Cross Blue Shield for being a sponsor of the DEI Forum. Thank you again for all your wonderful support over several years that you've been a part of this process. Also, too, just want to alert those who are on the call that on June 15th, we will be having our annual Diversify virtual summit. Hopefully, fingers crossed, this will be the last time it'll be virtual, but we have an outstanding speaker coming in. Her name is that of Amy Liu from Brookings Institute. She does a lot of work on inclusive economic growth. So very much in line with some of the priorities that the Chamber's laid out as part of our Chattanooga Climbs strategic planning. So looking forward to that. You will see more information as we get closer to that date. Very excited about having her coming in to speak with us. So on behalf of the Chamber and those of us who make up the team that brought you this production today, I want to thank you all. If you guys have questions about the content, if you have questions or comments, don't hesitate to reach out to me. My name is Lauren Steedley. Again, I serve as Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion here at the Chamber. I can be reached at lsteedley@ChattanoogaChamber.com. And again, I just want to say thank you and I wish you guys a great, wonderful rest of your Wednesday. And thanks again, Tracy, and you take care.
Thank you. You too. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you.